Hello, Neural Nectar. I'm thrilled to announce I hosted a parent webinar session with the community from Friendship Circle Online. A special thank you to Batia for allowing me to enter the community and disseminate the kind of education and information that we did, because I got a lot of good feedback from the parents for this, and even some of the participants are talking to me about what their parents learned. So I can see that it is a good communal activity and that this was fruitful. So thank you, Batia. Thank you to Friendship Circle Online for allowing me to have done this. I hosted a parent webinar series in which we talked about all sorts of stuff. It was meant to create a free virtual space for parents and caregivers to connect, grow, and learn from each other. So essentially, these sessions dove into topics related to emotional regulation, self-regulation, co-regulation, de-escalation, boundaries, and even brain development. All of our sessions always maintained a close and special consideration for how we can thoughtfully support neurodivergent individuals and their families, specific to their conditions and diagnoses. So, if you're interested and if you want to learn more, go ahead and keep watching. Let's keep learning and growing together. What we are gathering here to talk about is understanding emotional regulation. And so, what we're going to learn are the basics of how children develop emotional control. And not only children, but we were all children once. And so, each of us went through a very similar process of emotional development. And each of us can take away a lot of not only self regulation techniques, but things that we can also use for younger people and future generations as well. So this is our agenda that we will go through. Well, I'm excited to begin this journey with all of you. Like Batia said, my name is Angel. I go by Angel Hilario Alvarez, but you can all call me Angel. And so we have created these sessions to be informative, supportive, and interactive, right? We're all here to learn. We're here to support each other and create community. And we are also here to engage with each other and the content. So we want to make this a space where you are all caregivers, parents with experience. And if you all could have a PhD in these topics, I'm sure you could get a signature signed somewhere. So your own skills and experiences and stories are also information for the rest of us to learn from each other, to grow as caregivers together and as individuals. So, like I mentioned, the focus of what we're going to learn about is how children develop emotional regulation. This involves the basics of emotional control and how each of us as caregivers can support our child's emotional development. So, I have a quote of the day for us to reflect on at any point that we may like. It's understand your thoughts to grow, understand your emotions to heal, understand your behavior to transform, understand yourself and lead. And so, just a little bit more about the guy you're listening from right now so that we're not caught in a whirlwind of just information. Let's get to know each other a little better first. These three images that you see, one of them is of myself. The other two, one of them is of my virtual coaching business, Cerebroline, and another is of my podcast, Neural Nectar. These are two online resources that I have ongoing that I've created that I also incorporate even into the mindfulness stuff that I do here. One of the things that I've taught the participants of mindfulness is the physiological sigh, which is something that we'll get into later. And so I got my BA in psychology from Roosevelt University. I have a concentration in neuroscience, and I have a lot of experience in topics of self regulation, mindfulness, meditation, and what's called brain based wellness. Part of what's at the center of my coaching technique is teaching people how to lead a brain centered life. And so that is also going to inform a lot of how I go about these sessions, is a lot of what informs this understanding of, for example, emotional regulation is how the brain works. And so that is going to also be shared with you as well. I'm here because I care about building holistic, healthy environments, and I care about helping you and supporting you as a community and Friendship Circle Online, and creating a community of caregivers where we can support each other and learn from each other. And just a quick fun fact, when I'm not coaching or podcasting, I'm probably at the gym doing some yoga, deep into a neuroscience text, out in nature, or with my loved one. And so just a session overview for all of us quickly. It's going to be a little like school for just a quick second. I'm not going to bore you too much, but there are some concepts, some words that we need to get out of the way that we all need to clarify so that we all know what we're talking about. So we're going to get into those at first. It's going to be kind of like school. There'll be some bullet points. Then there'll be some interactive learning where we all get to share with each other. I will then share some strategies and real tools with you that you can use in real time. And then there'll be time for some reflection and Q&A, and then it'll be our wrap. So I have two videos to show you at first before we dive deeper into all of this to get us acquainted with what we're talking about. There's a lot of psychological studies that show that if we have some familiarity with what we're learning about for the first time, it helps to learn about it. So these videos will be just a big, quick run through these things. So what is emotional regulation? This is a very good acronym for all of us to remember, SONAR, and it stands for Stop, Observe, Name, Accept, Regulate. So SONAR is 5 steps that developmental psychologists came up with that can help us teach children emotional regulation in real time. So when a child begins to experience an intense emotion, they stop, they observe the feelings and where they are in their body, they name this emotion, they label it, they accept that they are feeling this emotion, and then they regulate their emotion. They make an intended decision on how to go about it.
As soon as you notice yourself beginning to lose your cool, stop and take a break. O is for observe the feelings in your body. Pay attention to how the emotions show up in your body. Take a moment to notice how you feel. N is for name your emotion. Figure out what you are feeling. Try to name your emotion. A is for accept what you are feeling. All feelings are okay. Accept what you are feeling, even when it's uncomfortable. R is for regulate your emotions. Use your tools and strategies to get back in control. With help, you can regulate your emotions.
Now that we have a bit of a more understanding of what emotional regulation is, I want to explain briefly what emotions are, because we got to know what we're talking about, right? And we want to talk about emotional control. So if we were to talk about the human mind, okay, what goes on here in our brain, which is very complex. The mind, if I were to define it, is a process. It's something that just keeps happening and keep going. It's a computational process of the brain. But if I were to split it into 3 continents, I would call them cognition, emotion, and intuition. And those 3 are the 3 main primary functions of the mind. So those are your thoughts, your feelings, and your behaviors. I'm going to play this video, which is actually from my podcast. It's a very helpful resource that it breaks this down a little more. The 3 last that I just talked about, cognition, emotion, and intuition, also happen to be the mind's 3 primary functions. These 3 work in coherence constantly throughout our mind, throughout our life, informing us of the decisions that we make, the places that we go, the people that we meet, the things that we say, the things that we do, everything we eat, all of it, everything, every experience that we've ever had, everything we've ever learned, every movie we've ever watched, every song you've ever heard, anything that you can think of that you have ever done, and even the things you can't think of that you've done, are all informing our mind constantly and all the time what to think, how to feel, what to do about it. That is the evolutionary perspective on why we have a mind at all. It's meant to protect us. It's meant for our survival. So again, these videos are just quick, brief little introductions to all of this, but essentially what I want you to take away, right, is that the mind has these 3 main functions, and what they are meant to do is help us navigate the world, interpret its stimuli and respond to them, and to understand ourselves and the place in the universe. Emotions play part of that. So the thoughts we have are part of that, the behaviors we do are part of that, so are our feelings. I want to talk a little more about now specifically what is emotional regulation. But before I give you a definition, before we talk about the definition of emotional regulation, I want to give you the definition of emotional dysregulation, because that mainly is how we have come to learn about what emotional regulation successfully done looks like. A good definition of emotional dysregulation is When someone has difficulty managing or controlling their emotions, especially in response to stress or challenges. So, for example, when a child feels overwhelmed by their emotions, this can lead to extreme reactions, which is what we all can visibly see and call outbursts, tantrums, or shutting down. So that's what we call emotional dysregulation, is when a child experiences this sort of event. Um, it can make it hard for children or even adults to handle frustration, disappointment, any sort of strong emotions. And something we must keep in mind is that when it comes to neurodivergent individuals, or for people who experience any sort of mental health issues, neurodevelopmental, neurological disorders, these kind of experiences, strong, intense emotions, can be like, if for us it's just a bad day, for them it's a horrible day, right? Because their brain, the way that their brain is processing this information, which is emotion, it's, this is horrible, this is scary, this is not good. And so emotional dysregulation for us, yes, it means difficulty managing or controlling emotions. But for a neurodivergent individual, it means really, really difficult. So, keeping that in mind, right, if that's what emotional dysregulation is, what is emotional regulation? This is the ability to monitor, evaluate, and modify emotional reactions in various situations. So, what does that mean? Is that when I experience a strong emotion, I am able to stop. I notice, oh, I'm feeling angry. I'm feeling sad. That's the evaluation part, right? To notice is I'm feeling hot in my face and in my cheeks, or I'm feeling a tightness in my chest. The evaluation is when we call it anger, when I'm heated right here, or nervousness when I'm queasy in my stomach, right? Sad when I'm cold to all my limbs. So modification of these is when we then bring in regulation. So there's these three-step process to regulation. Sonar gave us 5 steps. These are the three fundamental steps: monitor, evaluate, modify. So these 3 steps are what fundamentally help children respond appropriately to their environment as well as the rest of us. So we have a bit of an understanding now of emotional regulation and of emotions. Let's get a bit more of a definition for what an emotion actually is. An emotion is a complex psychological and physiological response to a stimulus. So, what that means is our emotions are not just mental, right? They're not just psychological. Our emotions are also physiological, they are felt throughout the body. And scientists have actually mapped out where in the body you feel emotions the most. I wish I would have prepared that chart for you all, but there is, I'll include it in a follow up resource page. But there's charts like that where they can show you where we tend to feel happiness, where we tend to feel anger, where we tend to feel sadness. And so emotions are something that we experience mentally, but they are also a physical bodily experience that involve, we can have an emotional reaction to our thoughts, right? If you start thinking sad things, you might become sad. If you start thinking happy things, you might become happy. If you start thinking about that time that that person did that thing that made you so angry, guess what? You'll probably become angry by thinking about that. But you can even have an emotional reaction to other emotions. So, say that you get sad, all of a sudden you start to feel angry that you are sad. That anger is a reaction to your sadness, right? Say that you are really afraid of heights and you're going up and up and up this tower, right? This elevator. And as you feel the gravity shifting, you start to get more and more queasy in your stomach and more nauseous, right? Your body is signaling to you, hey, I don't like this. Something is happening. So our emotions are up here, but they are also down here. We experience them on both levels. And we also experience emotional reactions to bodily sensations. When you get cold, you put on a sweater, right? When you get hungry, you run and you get something to eat. When you get thirsty, you might have a drink of water or something. So even our behavioral tendencies, right? When we tend to do something good for somebody else, altruistic, it actually tends to make us feel good too. when we do something bad to somebody else, it actually will make you feel bad as well. So our emotions are reactions to everything that we're experiencing. Essentially, what our emotions are is information. All emotion is information. So, keeping that in mind, right? If we want to talk about controlling, right, these emotions, if we want to control information, what does that mean, right? So, emotional control is when a child develops the ability to recognize their feelings, respond to them, and regulate them in appropriate ways. So, it doesn't mean that we're suppressing anything, right? Emotional control does not mean that you're saying, shh, we don't feel bad things. That doesn't happen. No, we do. Sometimes we get sad. Sometimes we get angry. Sometimes we feel pain. Sometimes we feel things that aren't so good. But that is still information. It's only information, right? That's what we must begin to teach children at a young age is that you can feel what you feel, but that is only a feeling. It is only information. It's only one part of your story, right? Because again, there's three continents of the mind: thoughts, feelings, behaviors. So it's very important to remind a child that even though they are feeling, especially when it's an intense emotion, that even though they are feeling a certain feeling, they must enter into self and realize, right? Okay, I'm feeling this, but I am still my mother's son and I should not be disrespectful, right? Even though I'm feeling angry. That's cognitive emotional control, right? Where, okay, I'm feeling this, but I'm remembering this, so it's going to trump that emotion, right? Or say that I'm feeling very tired, but I'm a very disciplined person and I brush my teeth every day, so I'm going to go brush my teeth before bed. That is even just behavior overriding emotion, right? Where, oh, I'm so tired and lethargic, but I brush my teeth every day. I cannot not do it. So you have to go brush your teeth. So there are ways in which our thoughts, our feelings, our behaviors all interact and influence each other. And this is a very complex interplay. So when it comes to emotional control, when we want to control what is going on emotionally in a child, right, what we're really doing is we're teaching that child, hey, what you're feeling, it's information. It doesn't mean that this is deterministic, that you're going to be stuck here, that it's forever. It means something right now. But in 5 minutes, it could change. In 10 minutes, it could change, right? Tomorrow, you could feel a completely different list of emotions. And that can be the hard part sometimes, right? That calming down process can be the hard part. And so we have tools for each of these steps, right? We also want children to eventually respond to their emotions in appropriate ways, right? So where a child, when they become angry, rather than hit someone, is I need to step away. I need to go sit down for a second by myself, maybe, right? And have some moment to breathe. Um, Eventually you also want that child to regulate their emotions, right? So not only do they stop and think, but then they do something with that emotion. So say that your child is angry um, about anything, right? If your child has reason to be angry, right, that's reasonable, right? You wouldn't argue with them. So if they have a moment to stop and think, and then instead of doing something about it themselves, quote unquote, they can express their anger. That's us teaching them what's called a reroute, right? Or a restructure, where we are training the brain to say, hey, when I get angry, I don't lash out, hit, or yell. I express like this. I speak like this. I stop, I think, and then I speak. And so that is at the core of emotional control, that part, the part where the child actually does something with their decision, with their feeling. So what can we do about it, right? How does a parent, how does a caregiver go into all of this? There are two main aspects that influence emotional regulation and emotional control, and those are emotional intelligence and emotional maturity. Emotional intelligence is what we call the capacity for them to identify, understand, and express their emotions and regulate them. Not only their own, but those of others as well. So, emotional intelligence is the capacity of a child to say, I'm feeling angry right now. And that's probably because of this. but I'm going to do this about it, right? That's emotional intelligence. But emotional intelligence is also, hmm, if I eat this cookie, even though mom told me not to, that will make her upset. I'm not going to eat the cookie. That is also emotional intelligence. Theory of mind is what it's called. When a child begins to think about how their thoughts, feelings, and behaviors will affect other people, or the fact that they know that others' thoughts, feelings, and behaviors can affect them. So then there's also emotional maturity, which is this child's ability to manage, act, and respond according to their emotions in appropriate ways. And it includes self awareness, empathy, accountability, and resilience. So, emotional maturity is essentially emotional regulation in success, right? You call somebody emotionally mature when they can successfully regulate their own emotions and present themselves in an authentic way because of it. I'm going to get into the bit of science of emotion for all of you. I know that I told you I would be a little like school, so I'm trying to get through this part quick. But there's a bit of science to emotions here, and I want to just break it down for you real quick. So there are four main dimensions of emotion. That's valence, arousal, motivation, and duration. Valence is that all emotions are either pleasant or unpleasant. So either positive or negative, right? All emotions go one way or the other. All emotions experience a certain level of arousal. Some arouse us a little more, some are more intense, some are less intense. All emotions have a certain motivation. Some of the emotions guide us towards something, some of them guide us away from things, right? So when you get excited and curious, toward, right? You want to learn more. When you get disgusted or fearful, you want to move away from stuff. And then there's duration. Some emotions last longer, some emotions last shorter. So, like we mentioned earlier, again, breaking it down a little more, there are the psychological emotions and the physiological emotions. Remember, it's not one or the other, it's always both. But this is the way we talk about it so we can understand the difference, if there really is one. So psychological emotions is more so the mental subjective experience, right? That part when we call it fear, joy, shame. It's psychological emotions are the ones more like happiness, worry, anxiety, nostalgia, um, the ones that more so shape our thoughts, choices, and behaviors. Whereas the physiological emotions are more so our body's automatic responses. So something like our racing heart or our tense muscles or tears, right, from our faces. So things like hunger, that's a physiological emotion. Thirst, being tired, all of these are driven by our nervous system and our hormones. So now that we have a good understanding of emotional dysregulation, emotional regulation, and what emotions are, who is all of this for, right? Why is emotional regulation important? It's important for all of us because all of us are dealing with emotions. From the moment, actually, I'll tell you this, even before we're born, through our death, we're always dealing with emotions because emotion is always information. Emotional regulation is ongoing, dynamic, and never ending, right? That means that emotional regulation is always happening, right? We are always feeling emotions. So right now I've got a fan going off above me that's making me a little cold, right? So it's keeping me up, it's keeping me alert, right? Um, we also emotional regulation is dynamic. So you experience different emotions in different contexts, right? So sometimes in some places and for some reasons you're sad, for others you're happy, for others you're angry. Emotions are dynamic. Emotions are also never ending. From conception and even from conception all the way through death, emotions continuously inform our nervous system, our brain, and the rest of our body. So as long as you are experiencing anything, you will most likely be experiencing emotion. So now that we understand emotional regulation, we can talk about what the difference is between a reaction and a response. An emotional reaction is when something happens and it evokes an emotion within you, and so you go by it. You lead by emotion. So a child hits a peer when angry, right? That's the child became angry, and so then they hit their peer. A thoughtful response is all the difference, right? It's when you intentionally plan, keyword intentionally, plan and act according to what has happened to you. So when I say keyword intentional, it's a thoughtful response. Think about what we're saying: emotional reaction, thoughtful response. There's almost a juxtaposition there, right? An emotional reaction is when we lead by emotion and let them get in the way and we do what they tell us. A thoughtful response is when you quite literally stop and think about what your emotions are telling you and you contrast that, right? You say, okay, I'm feeling this, but I'm also this kind of person. I want to be this kind of person. I want to live this kind of life. I have these values, right? You think about all of those things, and then your brain even stops and thinks about your past behaviors. Your brain will think, do I do this kind of thing? Have I done this kind of thing before? Is this the type of person that I am? Am I comfortable with it? So, a thoughtful response involves analysis at all three levels. Remember, the mind has three main functions: thoughts, feelings, behaviors. So, when you teach a child a thoughtful response, what you're teaching them is stop. For example, the example says, take deep breaths and effectively decide what to do, right? So, it's teaching a child, hey, you're feeling this emotion, and that's okay, but you have to stop and think about what this emotion is leading you to do and if that behavior aligns with who you are. That's at the center, at the core of emotional regulation. Is we must understand that our emotions are information, but they are not who we are. They are just information about how we feel in that moment. So we must never identify fully with our thoughts, our emotions, our behaviors. They are only just part of the story. So what does this look like in real life, right? As I said to you, there are three steps to emotional regulation, three main steps: monitoring, evaluation, and modification. So the first step is when a child notices their emotions. For example, a 5-year-old notices their chest feels tight and they feel weird before a school play. The second step is evaluation. This is when a child assesses the meaning and appropriateness of an emotional response. So, for example, a child spills juice and their caregiver doesn't yell. So the child thinks, this was a mistake. It's not a reason to panic. And so they appraise or they evaluate this event as safe and non-threatening. So that emotion is, oh, okay, I don't have to panic, but I have to just clean it up and everything will be okay. Right? So that's what that child will internalize. Modification is when a child learns how to express their emotions both internally and externally based on their context. So a child who feels frustrated during a game chooses to take deep breaths and sit out for a minute instead of yelling or quitting, right? They have learned to modify or adjust their behavior based on the emotion and environment they're in. The developmental progression of emotional regulation. What does that mean? It's like I mentioned to all of you, emotional regulation and the capacity for it actually starts in the womb. So before we are even born, when we are in our mother's bellies, right, and in a pregnant woman, that the experiences and emotions that that pregnant woman undergoes will affect her child, not only in the womb, in utero, but after birth as well. So our capacity for emotional regulations, right? If our mother was under a lot of stress or undergoing some trauma or any sort of events like that during pregnancy, it can affect the child in the womb and then after birth still. But there's still capacity for altering this, right? Just because we had certain experiences in childhood doesn't mean we can't alter them in adulthood or later. We can. Neuroplasticity shows us this. So emotional regulation doesn't stop at the age of 2. And we actually keep learning more and more complex emotions with more time because we undergo more complex situations. So we all have to continuously learn how to regulate our emotions in more complex ways. Emotional regulation from conception and throughout the first 2 years of life involves the foundations, right, of emotional attachment, of how that child will regulate their own emotions for a very long time. So things that influence children's emotional regulation during this time is maternal stress, the bonding experience with the mother and other caregivers, and the environment in the womb, and then the environment immediately outside after birth. Infants also rely a lot on caregivers for co-regulation. So this is going to be a topic for another class. So I'm going to just briefly touch on it. But co-regulation is essentially the foundational aspect of what caregiving is. It essentially means teaching one to calm down through one's own practice, right? So it's you sitting there with the child, holding them and rocking them and breathing with them deeply and, maybe humming for them, calming them down. And so this is when attachment security forms and it becomes the blueprint for future emotional safety and regulation. Then we go through the ages of 2 through 6, right? The emergence of autonomy, the terrible twos and whatnot, when children begin to say no and they start to feel more intense emotions and reactions. They can begin to name their emotions. They start to use simple tools to self-soothe. This is at the same time where they start to build a lot of core skills for social emotional learning and how they interact with others, how they play, and time for positive parenting as well. Caregivers at this time also play a central role in emotion coaching and modeling. So when we as caregivers and parents experience emotions or undergo certain situations, our children are always watching and observing us and how we handle it. And that becomes information for them on, oh, okay, so this is what I might do. So then middle childhood, ages 7 through 12, is when children begin to strengthen their skills and they begin to develop better impulse control, more empathy toward others, and understand social norms better. They begin to practice more regulation, and they also start to allow their relationships with their peers to influence them a little more as well. Then adolescence, ages 13 through 18, the brain is undergoing a whole lot of changes. There are intense emotions due to hormonal, cognitive, and identity shifts. The brain and the body undergo a lot of change throughout adolescence, and this can be very, depending on the child and depending on the teen, it can be a very unique or different experience. But for some, it can be difficult. For others, it can be a little easier. This is also the time when children begin to develop coping skills, emotional independence, and emotional support from others becomes very important for them. At the same time, though a teenager might tell you the opposite and say, no, I don't care about your opinion, mom or dad, it's quite the opposite. At this point in time, they actually really, 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 really need our guidance and validation. Teenagers are some of the most vulnerable populations, and without ongoing parent support, they can be led down some very bad paths. So then there's early through mid adulthood, which is where most of us are at. And so we are all kind of just regulating ourselves emotionally throughout life, different situations, career development, romantic relationships, parenting, life transitions. So we are kind of just trying to really better our skills at things like stress management and conflict regulation and such. And then later in life, ages 50 plus, this is where emotional priorities shift and we start to feel and think about different things. We start maybe to practice more mindfulness or spiritual practices. And we also start to really, really hone in on our social bonds with others as well. So as I've shown all of us, emotions don't stop, right? After 2 years after we're born, emotions and emotional regulation continues and keeps going. So what does that mean, right? What does that mean for all of us? If each of us are always undergoing emotions, right? What are we supposed to do with that? What can you as caregivers do with this information? Is we must learn how to regulate our own emotions and then teach children, teach others how to do it as well, right? Um, so I'm going to walk each of you through, and I'll show you real quick what this looks like. This is going to be a model for how to really implement emotional regulation in real time. It's called the CALM model. So connect, that means regulate before you educate. So when you see your child experiencing an intense emotion, before you want to talk about it or before you want to understand, you truly genuinely must just stay calm and present and try to connect with them. What they're experiencing when they are having an intense emotion, right, is a surplus of information, right? They might not even understand fully what's going on, especially because for a child, emotions are a little newer. For neurodivergent individuals, again, they're still more intense. Emotions could still be more complex, and for them, their brains also might be perhaps maybe thinking differently about what they're actually experiencing internally. So it may be a little harder, right, for them. So what it's important to do is we must stay connected at first. Before we want to do anything, we must really, really make them feel seen and heard and understood, right? That we see that this emotion is intense. We see that they're not really happy or whatever it may be. And we're empathetic toward them, right? We use our tone, our touch, and our presence to be empathetic and present for them. And this is to help children feel seen, safe, and soothed. So then comes alignment, right? Where you guide their feelings. We don't become dictators and we say, oh, no, no, don't feel that, or don't listen to those, or forget about it. We guide them, right? We say, okay, you look upset. And then you hear them out, right? They say, oh, well, I'm upset because my friend, da, 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 or this happened at school or whatever. That would be hard for anyone, right? You offer them simple tools or choices, right? In that moment, what does that mean? Guidance is you're not uh, dictating, you're not forcing, you're not imposing. You're just saying, hey, I see that you're undergoing an intense emotion. Something that really helps me when I'm feeling really, really sad or bad or angry, I take deep breaths. I go for a walk. I drink some water. I talk it out. Um, some of us may be in the more meditative spiritual side. Some of us may like to pray or meditate or speak to some or seek some spiritual counsel. Some of us may seek out a therapist. Some of us may seek out a friend. Some of us may work out, right? We all have different approaches. So your child starts with you, right? You are their first fountain of information. So the way in which you cope with and deal with your own emotions, please share that with them and help them build up their own emotional awareness and healthy coping. So not only that, then becomes lead, right? And so lead is you practice before the storm. So we don't take it would be horrid for us to wait until our child is experiencing an intense emotion and only then try to teach them how to regulate, right? It's easier to teach them when they're calm, right? If say that you are at home and you see that they're maybe they say to you, hey, I'm bored, mom or dad, or I don't really know what's going on. What do I got going on? What should we do today? And then maybe you say, hey, you want to try sitting down and thinking with me for a second? Maybe trying a bit of a centering exercise, or you want to do some yoga or a workout together, or would you like to spend some time together and do this activity? Anything like that, right? Teaching them those calming strategies when they are calm prepares them and yourself for those moments when they experience those intense emotions. It will be easier for you to say, hey, remember that when we experience intense emotions, we do this? Let's do that right now. Let's try that. This is a good moment for that. And so then your child will then begin to, oh, yes, I do this when I am upset, right? I do this thing when I experience intense emotions. And so then you also bridge their past emotions with their present situation and help them understand this is teaching me how to do this in real time. So that is the calm model: connect, align, lead. But then what is the model part? It means two things. Yes, it does mean that when your child is experiencing these difficult moments of intense emotion, that you use this model: calm, connect, align, lead. But that also, when you experience intense emotions, you practice the same skills you want your child to use, right? To model means that we lead by example. And so if you sit there and you think, oh, I would really like for my child to maybe meditate or pray a little more, invite them to meditate or pray with you if that's one of your practices, right? And show them how you do it. Invite them to do it their own way and figure out what works best for them, and leave it open-ended like that. And I promise you that it will even become a fun thing that they'll do with you if you incorporate it that way. Even exercise or other healthy habits like brushing your teeth together or flossing or preparing a healthy meal, any of those things, teaching your child, right? All of that together. Uh, you lead by example. And so this is going to be provided to all of you, but this is a little checklist of things that you can use, of things to do when your child is experiencing intense emotions. You can look through this checklist and think, okay, what can I do right now? What might help, right? Pause, take a breath, ground yourself, get on your child's level, use a calm, gentle tone of voice. So just little reminders for you of, okay, what do I do now, right? This is going on. What do I do now? Real quick. So this is there to guide you. I do just want to mention to all of you that we do have next session next week, which is going to be on co-regulation and connection. So the resources that we gave to you all today that you're going to get are more visual things that you can use. It's a feelings wheel, an emotions chart, a feelings thermometer, just the calm model, just a few visuals that you can use at home and for yourself. But next week, we're going to talk about as well breathwork techniques. I'm going to mention even some yoga practices that are very good to use, and other things like routines and setups and strategies that we can implement for co regulation. Very last thing, just if you are any of you are interested, I have started my, like I mentioned, my coaching and consulting, which is called Cerebraline. I am offering all of you, your children, yourself, first free consultation. I offer virtual science-based coaching and consulting for parents, caregivers, children, teens, families, businesses, even and organizations. And this is a list of services that I include. And this is also a list of places that you can find me. So there's my calendar, my website, my contact information. If any of you are interested in learning more one-on-one or more in-depth specific stuff, I'm a coach. I can help you, any of you, with any specific things that you may want to learn more about or talk about. I'm offering a first free consultation for you to discover whether my services are for you. So I wanted to share all of this information with you all. There's more we could keep talking about, but before I take up more of your time, it is already 8:06. Thank you all for being here. And again, I really hope to see you all next week. I hope that you like this first session, and I promise you next week's will be more fun.